Good morning, my friends. And it is a great day to be here at the 10-minute book talk with my friends, the inimitable. I don't even know what that word means, but it sounds good. She's all, you know what? And she's all that and more. Katherine Reay is here with us. Hooray, my fellow hostess and dear friend and neighbor who is just the best woman in the world, Rachel Linden. The other reason and I'm Marie Bostwick. The other reason it's a good day to be here is because we are here with Piper Huguley, who has written this delightful book by her own design. I told Piper before we went on, she's already made money even before we started this interview because I have personally sent this book as a gift to 2 different friends. I liked it that much. So don't take my word for it. You got to meet Piper. She's amazing. And so is her book. Piper, tell us a little bit about your book, By Her Own Design.
Hello, I'm Piper Huguley, and By Her Own Design is a biographical, historical fiction novel about the life of Ann Lowe, who was a Black fashion designer in the first part of the 20th century. She was born in 1898, Clayton, Alabama, very small, very rural place, and ended up designing for the fabulous, wealthy women of the social register. She designed evening and wedding gowns for the families of Roosevelts and DuPonts and Rockefellers, and most famously, the Auchincloss clan, of whom the stepdaughter of the Auchincloss family was Jacqueline Bouvier. So that is what it is all about in terms of Ann Lowe's most famous commissions and her climb to get from that very unlikely beginning to where she ended up.
Wow. Well, it was fascinating. I have to tell you, Ann Lowe was new to me. Honestly, the whole world of fashion in the past year with some research I did is new to me, and it was incredible. But how did you discover her? How did she come across your radar and that aha moment where it was her story you had to tell?
Well, I have always known from a historical point of view that the wedding gown designer for Jacqueline Bouvier's wedding dress was a Black woman, so I'd always known that in the back of my mind. But in terms of the particulars of her life, I was not inclined to go look until a tweet came across my Twitter stream from my editor, who was retweeting an article about her and said, "Who wants to write this novel for me?"
No.
And you raised your hand and said, "I'll do it."
So yes, everybody talks about Twitter as a bad place, but I don't feel that way because I got a contract out of it. So.
Wow, what a great book idea. Your editor just handed you like, "Hey, here's this awesome book idea."
Yes, and I was already thinking about what phase 2 of my writing career was going to be in terms of writing stories about unsung, unknown Black women. So I had been working on an idea for some time, but I just thought, okay, well, this might be a way to get my foot in the door. So I read the article and I looked up some more information about Ann Lowe, and I said, aha, yes, this is a novel. So I quickly wrote 2 pages and sent them to my agent, and my agent sent them to this editor, and it was like, so that she would know, please, I am on it. Do not let anybody else.
Wait, was she your editor at the time, or
No,
just
she was mine. I had no editor at the time. Probably my agent was like,
you just picked up a tweet.
You just took a tweet and did 2 pages and picked up an editor and a contract and a book idea.
Yes.
With gorgeous writing, but
with William Morrow.
Piper, you are our hero.
Amazing. Oh my gosh.
Well, okay, this is what a big nerd Nick I am. All right, so when I saw what her death date was, that is what enabled me to write the prologue, the very beginning. That was the couple of pages that I wrote and sent to her. She died the day after Charles and Diana got engaged, and I knew that. Yes. Instantly. Yes. So it was like instantly the idea came to my mind. What if she had been awake and aware and knew that Charles and Diana were going to get married? She would be wondering about that dress.
Right design.
Yeah.
Yep.
As an old lady. So that's where how I started with the prologue. So that's how got started. Yep. And my agent who had me at the time, she had taken me up. She was probably somewhere wondering, when is she going to come up with something that I can
That, you know what? Things like that happen. That is a great story.
That is a great story.
Amazing. Okay, so once you had this amazing story, what was your research process? How did you bring her to life then on the pages of your manuscript?
Well, again, more of this, great things in terms of life. Ann Lowe's hometown is 2 towns over from where my paternal family comes from.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
that's convenient.
Yes, I was already very familiar with that part of Alabama and what her childhood would look like. As well as I'm a scholar of Zora Neale Hurston, who also comes from that part of Alabama. So I had thought, and this is the thing, there's not much about Black women from that part of Alabama that's documented according to traditional kinds of sources. So I already felt I had a head start in that area because of those 2 aspects of my background. In terms of, for instance, there are no birth certificates. Midwives, they were documenting stuff, that kind of thing. And like I said, I already knew that because of my great grandmother, who was her contemporary in terms of age and all of that other kind of stuff. So I felt like I already had a head start in coming to understand her childhood and what that would look like, which was very important for the part of the story that happens. And no spoilers there, but yeah, in terms of that. So, but there was also a very important thesis that a young woman named Margaret Powell had worked on. She had been a scholar of Ann Lowe's since about the 2010s, and she completed the Life and Times of Ann Lowe for her thesis when she graduated from the Corcoran School of Art. And so I was able to draw a lot from her thesis. There was also a child's book, a kiddie book called Fancy Party Gowns, which the illustrations are really, really wonderful. So it's a really great gift for the child in your life about Ann Lowe's, what I call the factual tent poles of her life beyond her childhood. So those were the kinds of things that I drew upon and knew I could fill in the other aspects of her life with those factual tent poles that I had available to me.
Nice.
Well, I for a second, there's so much I want to talk, but really, I just want to gush on you for a minute. This book, you alluded to the fact it kind of the prologue is Diana's, but it opens with a bang, this book. And I don't think I'm giving anything away because it's so early on. She has been, contracted to design Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress. It's so interesting. It seems that you allude to, at least, and I was curious about that maybe Jackie didn't really like that dress, which was interesting, but, and you could talk about that in a second, but then it was so dramatic before we go back into her life, because just days before the wedding, there is a sewer pipe bursts in her workshop, and the dress is ruined that she has done. And all the gowns are ruined. And it is, a horrible moment. And she is not going to let this commission go. Another lesser woman would have just thrown up her hands. This woman does not. She goes across and she gets the church ladies. The church ladies come to the rescue, and everybody. So I love, there's this incredible sense of her right from the get-go, of her being so strong and so determined and so willing to tap into her community. There's just a lot going on there. And I'm just talking about your book now because I just want everybody to read this. but so one of the things, so, and you allude to the fact that, well, you don't allude to the fact, you just say it. In newspaper accounts, she was merely recognized as just a Black seamstress. They didn't name her. If she had been a white woman, they would have said who the designer was. I want to know, when did Ann Lowe, because the design community, by the end of her life, certainly recognized her as a pioneer, as a force. When did that begin to happen for her? When did that change?
Yeah, it was, I think, right about the time of the early 80s when she was aged and on her way out in terms of her health and everything. There was someone who's beginning to establish a National Black Fashion Designers Museum and was beginning to collect gowns, etc. And part of that, of course, would be trying to establish a historical timeline of when that all began, or at least continued, because it does continue beyond further back from Ann Lowe, but that Ann Lowe is a very important part of the timeline in terms of establishing that, and began to collect and see if people had gowns, etc. Right around the time that she died. So that when she died, there were about, there's about a good number of obituaries that are published nationally and internationally regarding who she was, and it's gone up from then, but especially in the past, I would say 3, 4, 5 years. Margaret, like I said, Powell was working on her thesis about 2010, but it's really kicked up in terms of the zeitgeist in the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, in terms of a lot of popular places publishing articles and things about her. And not everything they have to say is correct, which is one of the things that is interesting about the factual tentpoles of a Black woman's life in terms of that. So.
Yeah, I saw in several places, I think you kind of had to make a decisions about, what was true or what was not. And there are some places, and you talk, I think somewhere in the notes, I read this quite a few weeks ago, where, the historical record contradicts itself. So you just had to make a decision about what kind of made sense, which is what, historical novelists must do. And you do it so beautifully. My gosh, we're getting, I have about 47 more questions I want to ask you.
I know.
Right, I know there is so much.
That's a sign of a great book.
Thank you.
So much here. It is so well written. This is really as a page turner, because friends, if you like a book about strong women who just don't give up and find their way,
Who doesn't?
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you don't like that kind of book, we don't even want to hang out with you. So this is a book you need to read. But okay, running out of time. I've got to ask you one last and very important question. Piper, what is bringing you joy today?
Well, this conversation is bringing me a lot of joy. Yay!
We're glad. Well, you haven't spent this time with us, bringing us a lot of joy too. Thank you so much, Piper Huguley. We just admire you so much. I love your story. I know that as soon as we're finished with this call, all of us are going to go check Twitter, because there might be.
We're getting our next book ideas now.
Yeah, we want our next book ideas.
There you go.
Yeah, on so many levels. My friends, go and get this book right away by Her Own Design by Piper Huguley. Thank you, my friends, and we'll see you next week at the 10-Minute Book Talk.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Piper.